Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our final installment on our series of video lessons about civil rights. I am Miss Jennifer Blank, and I will be your guide on this journey. We're going to be talking about a lot of controversial issues during the course of this presentation, and rest assured we will revisit these in class where we can have a discussion about it. But in this lesson, I'm just going to give you an overview of the basic opinions that are present about these issues and why some of them may be a bit touchy. So here we go. All right, let's talk about some immigration and civil rights with regard specifically to Hispanics. Immigration rates today, they're the highest they've ever been since the peak in the early 20th century. Okay, so that was when we had an influx of immigrants coming from European countries in the 1900s. Nowadays, a majority of modern immigrants are coming from Latin America or Asia. A lot of people just assume it's Latin America. People forget that we have the Pacific coast, and on that side, there are a great many Asian immigrants that are coming as well. Now, it's interesting. This is an interesting statistic to note. By 2050, minority groups collectively will constitute the majority of Americans. This is what's called a minority majority. So white people who have been the majority will actually be lower in number than all the other minority groups combined. All right, let's take a look at this graphic here because we got to examine some data. This is important. So this is a distribution of population by race and Hispanic origin and the projections from 2000 to 2050. So in 2000, let's take a look at the graph all the way on the left. All right, in 2000, 69.4% white, almost 70% white. And then you see the breakdown: Black, Asian, non-Hispanic, Hispanic, and then all others. In 2010, white people drop down a little bit, Black people drop down a little bit, but Hispanics increase significantly, okay? And then by 2030, here's the projection. By 2050, here's the projection. So as you can see, by 2050, all the other groups will be larger collectively than white Americans. Now, why are we looking at this? What does this mean? Well, a lot of people vote based on this thing called identity politics, and they vote based on their gender, based on their race, based on their income bracket. So these aspects to us as individuals influence how we vote. So a person's minority status plays a large role in how they identify and who they identify with. This is going to change the electoral map as we go forward and which candidates are viable versus which are not. So as demographics change, so will politics. All right, and here's a close-up view of that graphic if you want to take a closer look at that. All right, so illegal immigration is the term used by folks who, you have illegal immigration versus undocumented immigrants. And some people just say immigrants. And so you have illegal immigrants, undocumented immigrants, and then still others are saying, why are we differentiating they are immigrants? The most of the people coming over to the United States and bypassing the legal procedure that's in play, most of them are Latin Americans coming in through the Mexican border, and they're looking for work. They're not necessarily looking to suck off the public dole the way that some opponents view them. They're looking to work. Key issues that come into play here are citizenship. How does one get it? Who deserves it? How do you earn it? And the issue of border crime. As everyone should be well aware, Latin America is besieged by drug cartels. And so a good bit of this crime, this border crime that we're concerned about, results from that. It also results from these folks called coyotes who charge ridiculous sums of money to bring people over the border illegally to bypass the established procedure for citizenship. So there's a lot of money and crime and poverty to be concerned about here. All right, so now let's look at how we deal with accommodating diversity in schools. You see this graphic in front of you, and it's got a breakdown of bilingual schools and the number of schools and then the year. And we're looking at the number of candidates who sat for an exam and the pass rate. So here, if you look at these statistics, let's just take 1998, for example. So out of 53 people who took the exam, 52% of them passed after 5 years in education. And then the national average, which includes all folks, not just people in bilingual schools, the average was 48.6. And as you can see, the numbers bear out that, according to this graphic, that bilingual schools actually increase test scores as opposed to decreasing test scores. And bilingual education is a hot button issue because children are coming into the schools and they're not able to speak English. So how do we navigate that? How do we handle that? One suggestion has been to have bilingual education. Another suggestion has been immersion. Here's another graphic. This is public opinion about bilingual education, and it's based on race. So overall, if you look at the overall number, people support it, 58 to 40%. If you look at non-Hispanic whites, even they support it, but by a much lower margin than blacks and Hispanics. So minority groups tend to favor bilingual education to a much larger degree. Here's another graphic. This is from a different article, author doing research on bilingual education, and to show this is an increase in scores that shows what happened when bilingual education was eliminated and students were enrolled in an immersion type scenario where they were taught English and mainstreamed much more quickly. Now, why do I talk about this? Well, number one, bilingual education is a hot button issue. Should we do it? Should we not? But the other issue is that you can use statistics and bend them to show virtually anything you want. And if you're not paying close attention to where the authors of these graphs are getting their data from, you can be swayed by statistics that are actually not true or that they've been manipulated. So we're going to explore the use of statistics in class, but I wanted to show you an example, because if you go back to the previous graph, this one shows bilingual education works and is better than traditional education, and this one shows that it doesn't work, but the public supports it. So what do? And this is why our politicians, in their defense, have a kind of a tough time figuring out which policy to go with, because depending on which graph you're looking at, that's going to determine which side you fall on the policy. But more than anything else, politicians are looking at this because this is what gets them elected. Statistics don't. Voters do. All right, so affirmative action. This is a hot button issue. It's especially been in the news the last few years because of the several Supreme Court cases. Talk about minimum of five different cases that have come to the court just within the last few years about issues with affirmative action. So what is it? It's a program that requires proactive steps to erase differences between women and men, or between minority groups and non-minority groups in labor markets or education outcomes. Okay, now what it is important to note is anti-discrimination laws do not equal affirmative action. Anti-discrimination laws are a just umbrella civil rights issue. Affirmative action is a proactive program that seeks to eliminate the gaps between the races or between the genders that exist. It is a proactive, government is taking direct action to equal the playing field, whereas anti-discrimination laws are fighting back against a problem that already exists. They're fighting, trying to stop the current violation of a law. Affirmative action isn't about violating the law. It's about equalizing the playing field for traditionally disadvantaged groups. So you can see, I hope you can see how there are very strong opinions on both sides of this issue. Let's just take a look at a couple of the Supreme Court cases that have been key. Now, my students, I really want you to pay attention to this first one. Regents of the University of California versus Bakke. That was in 1978. That was a key affirmative action case. Quota systems that only considered race of an applicant were unconstitutional. So people have this erroneous idea that affirmative action completely works on quota systems. That is what used to be the case. That has not been the case since 1978. Now, quota systems can be used, but race cannot be the only consideration within that system. So if you're using a quota system and you're hiring somebody just because they're black to fill the quota, that is unconstitutional. But you could have a quota system that includes other measures of whether or not somebody can or should be hired. So quota systems only, that only consider race, are unconstitutional, but not quota systems. In 1979, you have the United Steelworkers versus Weber. This upheld the use of race in employment agreements. Richmond v. Croson in 1989. This says that affirmative action plans must be judged on strict the strict scrutiny standard and must be narrowly tailored to achieve a compelling state interest. We're going to talk about this concept in class because I really want to explore this. The idea of strict scrutiny and compelling state interest can be very confusing, so I want to make sure that we're in class together to have a back and forth discussion about this. Grutter v. Bollinger and Gratz v. Bollinger, these were combined cases. The numerical benefits cannot be used to admit minorities into college, but it can be a plus factor. So again, you can't just look at admitting more minorities as a good thing, but it can, and that can't be your only determination, but you can use it as a factor, not the factor. Okay. Parents versus Seattle School District in 2007. Race cannot be used to decide which student attend popular schools because policy was not narrowly tailored to achieve a compelling state interest. Again, we're going to explore these concepts in class a bit more. So, quotas are not required, but they are an acceptable way to fulfill the requirements. Supreme Court ruled that race can be used as a factor, but if it's weighted too much, it is unconstitutional. So, this kind of pops the balloon of folks who are vehemently against affirmative action when they say quotas, quotas, quotas. Well, they haven't been paying much attention to the Supreme Court lately because Supreme Court said that it can be used as a factor, but if it's weighted completely, that's the only thing you look at, or even if it's too much, it's going to be unconstitutional. So the Supreme Court has modified how affirmative action actually works. So this brings a new twist to this debate that we are going to discuss in class. So these are people who support affirmative action, and this is how they identify based on political ideology. So as you can see, liberals uniformly favor it. Moderates are almost evenly split, slightly in favor, but conservatives are outright against it. Now this makes a lot of sense. If you understand political ideologies, this should make perfect sense to you. It's pretty much falling right along ideological lines. Fall freshman enrollment by race ethnicity before and after ending race-based affirmative action. This is very interesting. So if you look at when race-based affirmative action occurred, and that was with, this changes the numbers. Look, there's more people, more minorities who are getting admitted than there were when race-based affirmative action was in play. So that kind of throws a cog in the works as well for those people who were against affirmative action. So statistics can be tricky. They can be very, very tricky. Americans support affirmative action on college campuses. Total, they think it's a good thing. As you can see, there are fewer white people who think it's good, but most people still do. Republicans, again, falling right along party lines. Republicans hate it. Democrats love it. Independents like it. Not quite as much as Democrats, but they like it more than Republicans. Okay, so this is an interesting thing to look at. And remember, politicians make a lot of decisions based on public opinion because that's how they get elected. All right, so let's shift the focus a little bit to GLBT rights. Now, remember, GLBT folks are not covered by affirmative action. They are a completely separate entity. Now, with the gay community in politics, you have a lot of gay activists out there playing a role in both major parties. People think of them as being only Democrats, but there are these folks called the log cabin Republicans, and they are gay Republicans, and they are in the Republican Party. They don't have a whole lot to say, to be perfectly honest, but they exist within the Republican Party. Gay men and lesbians in the military, this has been an issue for quite some time, but don't ask, don't tell. The policy that if people found out about one's gayness or one's sexual orientation that was not heterosexual, you were dishonorably discharged from the Army. This officially ended in 2011. Same-sex marriages are a very controversial issue, although the Supreme Court is knocking them down left and right, and higher courts are doing the same. But same-sex marriages is an issue of federalism. Who has the authority? Does the federal government have the authority, or does do the state governments have the authority? It's a question of federalism. So this is something we're also going to explore in class. So the California Marriage Protection Act, also known as Prop 8 and DOMA, were overturned by the Supreme Court a few years ago. And currently 35 states allow same-sex marriage, with what looks to be more on the way. Another issue is child custody and adoption. These rules vary by state, and we can explore that more in class. Where is gay marriage legal? There's a map for you. So you can pause the video and take a look at this map, and just to give you a sense of regionally how the United States feels about the issue and what's happening. GLBT rights, with regard to transgender rights. Unfortunately, most states do not include protections. Here you see a map detailing who has protections and who doesn't. So you can pause this video and take a look at that. And that is the end of our video. That wraps up our video lessons for civil rights and civil liberties. I hope you learned what you needed to. We will certainly explore these topics more in depth in class, and I will see you in the next unit.